Let's move on to our second session now. Whole new scenario. Here we go. This is the office furniture manufacturer Officeworks PLC, and they are facing some challenges.
Officeworks PLC became #1 in the European office furniture market in 2008. Its brand synonymous with high design yet low-cost products. Its CEO, James Stafford, was an aggressive marketeer who closed manufacturing in the UK and Europe and moved production to the Far East. But by 2018, Officeworks started to come under threat from a competitor, Green Space, whose brand focused on sustainably sourced materials and low-carbon production. By the time COVID struck, Green Space had overtaken Officeworks in Europe, and the business now faced an existential threat as the crisis brought a series of contract cancellations, along with a seismic change in corporate attitudes to home working. Unable to offer a credible survival strategy, Stafford was forced to resign, and the board hastily recruited a new CEO, Jennifer Cutlass, who took over with a promise to tackle Green Space head-on and to transform the business model. Cutlass knew that she needed to be radical. Her vision was to move into creating desirable home office furniture and to dilute their rivals' green advantage by making the business the most carbon-efficient player in the sector. But her ideas were met with little enthusiasm from her senior leadership team. Only her CIO, Lyndon Watts, supported her, and he offered an even more radical strategy. In his view, it wouldn't be enough just to move their production to FSC timber only and to shift their IT to low-carbon data centers. He proposed using digital technology to make Officeworks the first zero-carbon office furniture company, creating production centers close both to areas of sustainable timber production and to the main markets. His goal was to drive carbon efficiency through every aspect of the supply chain, from the sourcing of components right through to logistics. He also aimed to transform all their offices into high-tech meeting centers, where you came periodically to collaborate with colleagues, but you worked from home. His view was that Officeworks could not just adapt their old practices to fit the new normal. They needed to see the COVID crisis as a driver for positive change. Jennifer Cutlass realized that it would be hard to sell these proposals to the board, and that she'd need to fundamentally rethink both her product design and development strategy, and the business's very traditional approach to sales and marketing. But thinking through all the challenges, she began to feel excited. This really could be an opportunity to transform Officeworks into a world-class business in the post-COVID world.
Then or something. I don't know. It's like a soap opera, isn't it? You know, will Lyndon Watts survive or will he succeed? We'll have to find out. So we're recognising in this, obviously, that the pandemic has had a devastating effect on some businesses, and businesses which have, of course, had a fantastic record of success. And office furniture manufacturers, suppliers, clearly they're going to be tremendously hit by the pandemic. So is the time now really to adopt new business practices, new business strategies? That ambition they talked about creating net zero carbon furniture and creating a business like that, rather, is that actually realistic? Give us your thoughts on that. Have you tried it? Have you looked into it? What are the pros and cons? What's possible, what's not? What helps out there? What stumbling blocks? And please, let's share what solutions you may already have. First, let's talk to the panel on this one. Clay, what are your thoughts? How are they going to survive on this one? They've adjusted their team at the top.
Yeah, they might have bigger challenges, to be honest, given the environment. But they clearly are going to have to think about how this matters to them, their employees, and to the customer. I think, initially, my first reaction is they can't just be a me too. It sounds like their competition has already kind of gone off and done this. So, now being possibly if they don't have that much of a time gap, then they could be a fast follower, right? But you'd want to go one beyond them.
Fast follower if they're there in time.
If they're there in time. If they're there in time, and tough to know the business environment, whether whether that's possible. I think whether this makes them stand out or it's a me too, and it just keep it table stakes, is still important, right? So I think it's important to the employees, it's important to the customers, even if it doesn't become a point of differentiation, right? In today's environments, right, we found that employees want to be part of a green company, right? It's important to them. We found out they're attracting the new joiners. They want to be part of something culturally that fits with them, and this is really high on the list, number one or number two. And then thirdly, actually customer alignment, which is really where they seem to be going, which is certain customers will buy from companies that are greener than others. And we found that that's a pretty good alignment for us in terms of our own policies.
So again, put in that position they've been put in, there's actually lots of different advantages of making
it's
that
not singular.
change.
It's definitely not singular. But from a business and competitive, we're probably lacking a little bit of information, but they have to do it at least to be a me too from that perspective and stand out in some other way.
Well, Jennifer Cutlass is excited we're here anyway, so that's at least a good start. Melinda, can digital technology in itself realistically drive down net carbon emissions and so on?
Absolutely, it can. And I think that, to Clay's point, Officeworks has fairly lofty goals, and I think hearing everything that we heard in that scenario, they really need, I think, to look to leapfrog their competitor, who is seen as the green, the green company in their particular space, and also in office furniture is certainly a difficult business, I would think, to be in right now. But digital technology absolutely can help them change the game. And as far as their business overall and their strategy, and then carbon neutrality actually as also a benefit that comes from having a digital first focus. I think you can see all kinds of statistics. The World Economic Forum has cited that digital technology alone can reduce carbon emissions globally by 15%. The UK has a goal of getting to carbon net zero by 2050, although only 46% of companies have started their initiatives to get there. About 1 in 8 have indicated they will be starting in the next year. And only 10% are already carbon neutral. So I think it's definitely, if it's something that they want to have on the front end of their strategy, it's something they absolutely can get to. But I think they need to look at it in the context of a broader digital transformation strategy.
That's the bit I'm missing in what you've said. How come the digital transformation will help them?
So I think it's interesting because as a fairly traditional business, having carbon neutrality at the headline, they might struggle with the board on making that like a key focus area or strategy for their company. But looking at overall digital transformation that needs to take place all across the supply chain, to their sales and operations that they talked about, to how they deliver and support their customers is something that they could look at. And as a part of building a digital foundation and building resilience, agile infrastructure, ability to respond and change and evolve, to modernize using digital technology, they'll be able to also have a benefit of increasing their carbon neutral position.
It strikes me maybe it's a little costly. I mean, Mark, can companies drive down their carbon emissions? Can they bring themselves nearer zero carbon and cut costs?
Absolutely. Green is good for business. It's certainly risen up the agenda hugely in recent years. If you move, for example, into the Google Cloud, you are moving into a completely carbon offset environment. We've been the largest corporate buyer globally of carbon offset energy, and since 2017 it's carbon neutral. So you can save in your IT environment. Now that's scratching the surface, of course. There's a lot more to it than that. It's also about how you can reduce transportation emissions, and certainly the rush to working from home has certainly had that impact, probably an unintended but very beneficial consequence to the world. But it's more than that. We all have a duty, I think, to seek out opportunities to cut carbon. And so, for example, in our data centers, we used artificial intelligence to cut the cost and energy of our own cooling in our data centers. So the technology is there, and you've got to eat, in the tech industry, you've got to eat our own cooking. as well, to actually seek out opportunities. And so I think in this case study, it's just the board having the open mind to seek out the opportunity, whether it's in the IT domain but also relocating some of their facilities to be either nearer the employees or the customers or the suppliers. So trying to cut the cost of carbon throughout the whole business operations, I think, is an obligation on the board. And
you said, I think I'm right in saying, you said working at home helps that. And this is a point I want to turn to Margarete on, if I may, because at the end of the day, I mean, I was thinking before it got warm this week, I'm going to have to turn the heating on at home soon, and we're all going to be turning on the heating at home when we would have been at work. Now, it might save the carbon emissions of the company, but net emissions surely up.
I don't know. I think it's a bit of a trade-off. And I really agree with your points, Mark, there around a green recovery. We are seeing lots of organisations really considering how they accelerate their digital transformation while also making a green recovery, while reducing cost. And that is a lot for any board to grapple with while growing the business to the bottom line, right? In a difficult environment where we're facing Brexit. So for anybody dialing in today, there's a lot of pressures on. But I think a lot of this is trade-offs. We're not commuting as much, right? We're not travelling. Air traffic has gone down. So I think, yeah, we might be turning the heating on, hopefully not for another couple of weeks. But at the same time, we're not commuting. I think that the offices are reducing down. They're becoming a lot more energy efficient. And in fairness, a lot of utility companies that are probably dialing in today are really trying to drive out new innovations around reducing the burden on fossil fuels and embracing renewable technologies as well. So I think we're seeing some unlikely partnerships emerging between tech companies and green players. But this is certainly the time and the dawn for a green recovery.
Interesting at what point employees start to say it's costing me a load of money to heat my house. I mean, we haven't really perhaps got into that debate yet.
Well, I think it'll go back down to flexibility, right? Are employees happier? For some, they'll want to go back into the office. They'll say, I don't want to turn on the heating, or actually it just doesn't suit. I don't have the space. I'm not privileged enough to have, I live in a shared household. I'm a graduate sharing, a flat. And they may want to go back into the office. So I think the key here is going to be flexibility and agility. And how do we provide those choices to employees and our customers as well?
OK, stand by. We have another poll coming up just in a moment. Before we go to that, Clay, this idea of zero carbon and having a zero carbon strategy, how important is that to the brand of a business?
Yeah, I mean, I somewhat answered that before, quite frankly, but it's massive, right? Because, again, the brand and what you represent attracts customers, retains your people, right, and also signals to any new potential joiners.
Yes.
What you represent. So it's absolutely at the core, right, on all three of those dimensions. And I think if I think about this particular scenario, if I could draw a dot, kind of a line between the Clipper scenario and this one, what Margarete said, and what we're talking about here, and Mark as well, Melinda, is actually if you remove waste. And digital can remove waste, right? So extra travel, in manufacturing, right? Getting into more just-in-time production, so you have less inventory, less stuff lying around. Every stage of that process where stuff is just laying around is waste, and waste equals carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Right. And so and also, by the way, all that waste also is opportunities for security challenges. Right, so there's a way, if you combine the two boards and the two business problems, actually just go digital, remove those steps, and you help the environment and also improve security.
Yeah, and you're right, you did talk earlier about the number of different advantages there, and we talked about recruitment and retention and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's important for the brand, not just PR.
No.
There's more to it than that.
Absolutely.
Okay, some questions in. Let's see who wants to take these. Do we think that the changes introduced during COVID will be transient or permanent? We were talking about that. Were we talking about this before we started? I think we were.
I think we were talking about
just in terms of, is anybody ever going to say you may now shake hands? Is that ever going to happen? But I mean, on the bigger issue, the business issue, are these changes transient or permanent? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think
Linda?
that. Not to be wishy-washy on the answer, but I think some will be transient and some will be permanent. And I think that we're able to leverage the moment that we're in, to Margarete's point again, that this is a time, and the pandemic can serve as a catalyst to accelerating all kinds of change that is good for our businesses. And I think that, we talked about earlier, but prior to this conversation, about it has really accelerated companies' abilities to make decisions and not doing analysis paralysis and having these long-ranging goals, but looking at what's in the moment, how quickly we can achieve some of these goals that we thought would take months and months and months to enact. So I think our ability to move faster in decision making hopefully will be a permanent change. I think relative to home working, I think we're always going to have this conversation now around flexibility and what we can provide to our employees as far as and our companies as far as both that mental health challenge of needing to be in the office and around people and collaboration and teamwork, customer focus, customer experience, but also giving that flexibility to work from home, which ultimately then drives down this conversation around carbon emissions.
Good moment to come back to that. I will come to the poll in a second, I promise. But Mark, this mental health awareness, we have Mental Health Awareness Month next month and Mental Health Awareness Day on, I think, the 10th next month, and so on. Really key. And if we make this permanent, it's not going to suit everybody. People are going to find it really difficult.
Absolutely. I personally don't think the world will revert to the pre-COVID world. I think we probably mostly agree on that. The question is how much of the change will remain permanent. I think the pendulum is swinging back. But certainly, as human beings, being in that same room for the past 7 or 8 months, that's challenging. I forced myself to stop working and go out for a walk or go and see my kids. But I'm fortunate. I work in a company that offers lots of support. There's professionals there if I want. They run gym classes. Actually, I could choose not to work all day, but of course I wouldn't be an employee for very long if I did that. But I do think that is probably new culturally for many companies, and they need to consider that because, as I said, we're social beings. We love that water cooler conversation, and that technology is enabling that. We can do that through the screen, but it's vastly different.
And making that choice of when to stop walking the dog and go to work.
Yes.
While you're, and of course, we must remember, some people have very small environments to live in.
I think
they look to get out of that.
It's interesting how it ties into another concept we talk a lot about is empathy. And a lot of this goes along the line of sustainability around being more employee focused around some of these bigger, sometimes loftier, softer goals that are becoming mainstream for a lot of companies as a part of their strategy. But something we talk about is exactly what you were saying, is around empathy, of understanding it's great for me to work from home. I have an office. I've got a great garden I can walk out into, but not all of our team members have that. There's obviously childcare issues. There's younger workers who might have 3 or 4 roommates. I think we have to be really empathetic to every situation that
people are
dealing with.
Situation and not be cooped up. Lots of things in that area. Do keep your thoughts coming. Okay, let's do the next poll. Poll coming up for you now. And if you press the button, you can see the question, take the choice of answer, and we'll have a look at what you're saying in a moment. Thank you for your questions. Still coming in. We have here, is it possible to have a fully digital economy? Surely somewhere people still need to create physical goods and the tools to manufacture them. And in a way, doesn't this come back to what we're talking about, here's us talking about, we like working at home, walking the dog or whatever it may be. Some people have got to get in there, they've got to travel, they've got to work. This working from home digital economy is a pipe dream for some people. Thoughts on that? Are we ever going to move to that one, Margarete?
I think Estonia has done a good job of digitalising as much as it can, but I think it's about balance, right? And not everything is going to swing the full pendulum towards a digitalisation model. And I think we do, as you said, Mark, we crave, we're social beings. And so we are going to crave face-to-face activity. Organisations will want to meet their customers. We will want a group, and I think we want to come together as a community. So I think it's going to really depend on the industry, the sector, the organisation. There's no one size fits all, and there's no winner through this. I think we will digitalise as much as we can, and certainly it's been accelerated, but this is about balance, right? And it's about building resilience for the long term. And so I think it really is going to take some consideration depending on the vertical. But I honestly, there is no one silver bullet for this one. So I don't want to be ignoring the question or ambiguous about it. I think it is really going to be a balancing act here.
And recognising that there are areas we must apply it, and there's areas which perhaps we have to bear in mind there are some ways we've got to carry on. Let's turn to that poll. This is what you said. Well, here was what we asked you. What coping strategy do you think Officeworks plc should adopt in response to the competitive threat during its period of existential uncertainty? There's a good one. So, 11% of you said move cautiously. What's the percentage on this one? 77% accelerate digital transformation goals. And 11%, I think, don't know, I think that's what that one is, which is fair enough. But look at that, and sit tight, do nothing, 0.
Yeah.
So there you go. So we've got 77% of people really saying accelerate the digital transformation goals, and then 11% saying move cautiously. Melinda, how do we pick up on that? Is that good to hear?
That's actually really encouraging to hear. That 77% say implement, digital strategies, and then move cautiously. I think is something that you're always weighing. But if I look at Officeworks, they really have no choice but to move, and I think move aggressively. And it's something that they're looking at. From the scenario, they're looking at. The pandemic as an opportunity for them to really shape their entire strategy and how and change their business entirely. And it sounds like the CIO, although I would argue he or she.
One or the other.
One or the other.
Maybe.
One or the other. Can't be the sole person that's driving the digital transformation at Officeworks or the change in strategy, but certainly implementing digital technologies can and will help them get there. And then furthermore, this concept of carbon neutrality, it could have a downstream benefit.